Welcome to MMAPlay365. I'm Newsome and I'm here to recap UFC 271 from an AI perspective. So for those that missed it last weekend, we released our brand new UFC prediction software to the public after the testing phase ran through. That's called Base AI, and I'm here to talk about some of the predictions, some of the percentages that Base AI put out last weekend. Now, after the event, from a win-loss perspective, it was hitting around 57% last weekend, which is a little bit lower than what it was throughout the testing phase. Throughout the testing phase, it was around 68%. But there's a couple of fights in particular that I think is definitely worth mentioning in regards to the predictions the AI was putting out and how that actually played out in the fight. And the first two fights that I need to mention, Sergey Morozov versus Douglas Silva Andrade, and also Jared Cannonier versus Derrick Brunson as well. So the AI picked Sergey Morozov, the favorite, and it also picked Derrick Brunson as an underdog at 67%. So both of those fights were actually going great from the AI perspective until obviously it didn't. Sergey Morozov had a phenomenal first round. I tweeted out it was almost a perfect first round. He dropped Douglas Silva Andrade. He was beating him to the punch. He was wrestling him. You know, he was just completely having his way. And then in the second round, it surprisingly flipped on its head. Douglas Silva Andrade hit Morozov with a hard shot, had him hurt. And from then, Douglas Silva Andrade just absolutely ran all over Morozov. So again, that was a fight that was going great from the AI perspective until it wasn't. And then we look at the Jared Cannonier versus Derrick Brunson fight, and I actually personally bet Jared Cannonier as well. So that was definitely a head-to-head that myself and the AI had. Through the testing phase, the AI was beating me constantly when we were going head-to-head. So, you know, from a personal perspective, I'm glad to get one back over the AI there. But listen, even the AI had Brunson at 67%. Brunson almost had Cannonier knocked out, and then he almost had him choked out as well. Cannonier was saved by the bell, and then, you know, Brunson, his cardio dropped off a cliff and Cannonier came back and beat him. So again, that was another fight that was going great until it wasn't. And, you know, if the AI if those fights had gone, you know, the different way, if Sergey Morozov was able to finish Douglas Silva Andrade, if Derrick Brunson had more time against Jared Cannonier and he ended up winning, you know, that 57% that I'm talking about then turns into 71% for the AI on the night, which is better than the average it was hitting through the testing phase. And bear in mind that AI will only get better the more data that's fed into it as well. The algorithms will get better the more data it has. So over time, it will gradually get better anyway. But then the other two fights that I think are worth mentioning, the main event and the co-main event. So Tuivasa, the AI picked Derrick Lewis to win. I think it was 56%, so there wasn't much in it. But the AI actually had Tuivasa to win via knockout at 40%. And Tuivasa was around plus 225 to win via knockout. So again, the AI is showing great value. And the beauty of the way we outlay this AI is, if you don't agree with the AI pick and you still want to go against the AI from a win-loss perspective, there's still ways to bet the fight. And like I say, if you like Tuivasa and you wanted to ignore the AI from Derrick Lewis's win-loss perspective, then Tuivasa at 40% knockout plus 225, tons of value there. And the final fight that I want to talk about with the AI was the main event with Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker. It actually had Robert Whittaker a very, very slight favourite. I'm talking 50.6%. So it was almost a coin flip. Now the bookies had Israel Adesanya at around a 3-1 favourite, minus 300 favourite in this fight. The AI knew that that fight was going to be much closer than the bookies were anticipating. And even though Israel Adesanya did win, it was a very close fight, a fight that some people actually thought Robert Whittaker won the fight. I get that argument. I don't agree with it. But the point is that AI was seeing that fight much closer than what the bookies were seeing it. So although the AI didn't pick Israel Adesanya to win, again, you can sort of see where the AI is coming from, how it's sort of putting everything together. And look, that fight was much closer than the bookies suggested. So again, potential value from Robert Whittaker's perspective on the AI. And that's pretty much it for a quick recap. You know, we've got the full results on the MMAPlay365 website. So if you want to see the full results from the AI, every fight, the win-loss, the method of victory, knockout, submission, decision, and also the method of victory plus round. So fighter A to win via knockout in round 1, round 2, round 3, or submission in round 1, round 2, round 3. We've got all the results, and we will be listing the results publicly now we're out of the testing phase for every single event, so you can get that all on MMAPlay365.com. That's all for the recap from the Bayes AI perspective. We'll be back next week for the recap after UFC Vegas 48.